Welcome to the FNO InsureTech Podcast, a place where movers and shakers from all points within the insurance ecosystem gather and discuss all things InsureTech. Here are your hosts, Lee Boyd and Rob Beller.
Hey, podcast world. It's that time of year again when
Christmas?
No, Lee. Lee's
Oh.
Lee. See, you have to understand why Lee just said Christmas. Okay? If you don't know Lee Boyd, like I know Lee Boyd, then you don't know that Lee is the guy in your town or city who goes beyond on the other side of all out. So there's all out and then there's past all out. That's
Yeah,
what Lee does with Christmas and Christmas decor. Did I say that right, Lee?
we go big. We go big. We look forward to it all year long. And I would say that we're already dreaming. And by we, I mean, I'm already dreaming about Christmas season. Let's just say this morning while I'm taking my daughter to school, we're jamming out to a little Christmas theme music.
Well, and so here we are. We're in September right now.
Mhm.
If we would have been in March of the year, and I would have said that, Lee would have immediately gone to Christmas in his head too.
Because
So
we were probably listening to it then too.
it's a 12-month obsession. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say. That is very fair to say.
Okay. So every month is a Christmas month. Some though. When do the decorations actually go up?
They start going up the day after Halloween.
All
But
over.
it takes-
And so people can get a correct picture of this.
Yeah.
Lee lives on a cul-de-sac, and his home is, how do you describe it?
It goes to music, everything. Like, let's just say
Lights,
there's lights everywhere. There's
moving
inflatables, moving things, TVs in the window. Like there are lines of people that come by at Christmas time, and I look forward to it. It's my little hobby in the Christmas season.
news programs come by
They do.
and film it.
They do. I've been on quite a few different film newscasts.
Do they interview you when that happens?
They do.
Mm-hmm.
They do. I've
Why
been
do you-
interviewed once or twice. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And what kind of questions do they ask you? Do they ask you this question? Why in the hell do you do this?
They always ask, how long did it take? Did anybody help you? Why, how long have you been doing this for? And I've been decorating like this a little more of a year for almost 20 years. Almost 20 years. I've been in this house 15 years. And so I've been decorating this house for 15 years.
Are the kids into it now? Do the boys help you? Lee has two sons.
I do. I have two sons and a daughter. They offer. I don't always take them up on it. I think if I did, they would help me. My middle one helps me out more. My daughter helps me. My oldest one, not so much. He doesn't really want to help, which is fine. It's not his hobby. It's my hobby.
Well, I mean, I would think it would be perfectly normal for one of your kids to say, "Oh my God, this is so embarrassing."
I did get asked a long time ago to stop dancing in front of the house in a Buddy the Elf costume. My oldest son asked me to please stop doing that because his friends all drove by.
I have video of Lee Boyd on a roof of our old building at 470,
Yeah.
being Buddy the Elf.
Yeah. With snow. It was
with
snowing.
snow,
We had a
full
snow blower.
everything, and surprising people as they came into work. That was right just like a few days before Christmas.
Yeah, and it was the Christmas before COVID.
What was it? Was that 2019?
And we had all these grand ideas how we're going to go bigger next year. And then life happened and it didn't happen.
No, it did not. But
Yeah.
so to say that Lee is into Christmas would be a great understatement.
Yeah, I do like Christmas. But really, that doesn't have anything
But
to do
that's
with
not
our
why I said, do you want to know
podcast.
that? Believe it or not, Lee, it's not why I asked the question, do you know what time of year it is?
Did I derail this thing?
A little bit, but that's okay. I think that it was about time 5 years later that we get it all out
that
about
we talk about this.
about your Christmas obsession. Do you have just last question? So this year, what's new this year?
I don't know yet. I don't know. I'm gonna have something in the backyard new, because I do the front and the backyard. There'll be a new walkway this year and something new in our photo booth.
In your that's right, folks, you heard that. A
Yeah.
photo booth. So
Yeah,
people can do what with the photo booth?
they can take selfies. They can do their annual Christmas cards, whatever they want, and it'll be fun. It'll be a fun time.
They can park,
Yeah.
get out of their car,
Yeah, there are
walk
walkways.
into your yard,
Mhm.
go into the photo booth, and take a selfie.
Yeah, they can walk throughout the whole whole yard.
Wonderland.
It's not that big, but there's pathways that you walk on. Snowballs you can throw. It's all interactive.
I wish we could post this on our.
Well, if it's any good this year, I bet
Okay.
we could post
All
it
right.
somewhere.
Okay. Well, the reason that I said it's that time of year again, because it's almost time for ITC, formerly known
Oh.
as InsureTech Connect in Las Vegas.
It's exciting times.
It's that
We
time of
love
year
it.
when all InsureTech nerds' thoughts turn to Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
And those few days of running around Mandalay Bay, running into anybody who's anybody in the InsureTech business, right?
It is. We get to go there with 9,000 of our closest friends to
Mhm.
one of the best expos in our
Totally.
industry.
Yeah, period.
And
Uh-huh.
it is a fantastic time.
Mhm.
It's a fantastic time. If you've never been, you've got to go. If you listen to this podcast, you have some interest in InsureTech, it is the conference to go to.
Lee and I have gone many times.
Many.
And I think all of them. I think Lee's been to all of them that there's been.
Yeah.
And we have a great time. We see people we've interviewed. We see people who we've met through the years. It's kind of like a high school reunion
It is.
for us. A little
It
bit.
is. I was actually on LinkedIn today and I saw a couple of people that we always see at ITC. And I thought,
Mhm.
hey, we're going to get to see all these people.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Anyways, with that in mind, we wanted to start doing stuff in and around the ITC phenomena, and you can't have a better place to start than with our guest today. Why? Because it was his idea,
Yeah.
his spark in that big brain of his that said, boy, you know what? I'd really like to have a conference about insurance technology that I would like to attend. And so that person, Caribou Honig, who's our guest today, went out and found Jay Weintraub and others, including Bill Harris,
Yeah.
and decided we're going to make an InsureTech conference. Neither of them, in particular, insurance guys. And what happened, Lee?
It became the conference to go to. Year over year, it grew. The first one I went to, I think, was at Caesar's Palace.
You went to
wanna
the
say it
first
was
one, I think, didn't
Yeah, I think it was Caesar's Palace. I can't recall, but we quickly grew, and it is the conference. And as Bill Harris said on one of our podcasts that we had, Caribou wanted to make a conference that he wanted to go to.
Right.
And that's what this is. This is a conference that anybody would want to go to. There's educational stuff, there's expos, there's meeting areas, there's new startups, there's all sorts. It's a great one to go to.
Yeah, lots of networking and opportunities to meet new people and to meet important, influential people. And the best part I think for both of us about ITC is just that. Regardless of the side of the sell that you're on, as a consumer or as a seller, the openness and willingness to meet and talk and discuss is amazing. And by the way,
Yeah.
because you're a loyal FNO InsureTech podcast listener, and we love you, we have a special offer just for you.
Yes, we do. We have a promo code that you can use. It'll take $200 off of your ITC registration. So whenever you go to sign up, we want you to use the promo code ITC, V as in Victor, FNO, 200. Now, that was a lot. But if you look at our guest notes, if you look at the notes on this podcast, it'll also be there for you. So one more time, that's ITCV FNO 200. And that'll take $200 off of your registration.
And with that $200, you can take Lee and I to lunch.
Oh, yeah.
You could buy Lee and I drinks. I mean, there's many things you can do with that money. So
yeah, it's a great savings, and we encourage you to invest it back into us if at all possible.
please.
We kid, sort of.
So anyways, we thought, why don't we get Caribou back on here? It's been a few years now.
Yeah.
And do a check-in with Mr. New Mexico, because that's what he is now. He's out there being a New Mexican, and see what he has to say.
Let's do it. Let's talk
what
to
do
him.
you think? So without further ado, because we've a-dude quite a bit so far today.
Yeah,
Here
we have
is-
a dude.
Here is our interview once again, a holder of the F&O InsureTech smoking jacket many times over. Co-founder, chairman, I believe, of ITC, Caribou Honig. Hey everybody, we're here with, to say this is a special guest, it would be an understatement. Caribou Honig has been on our podcast, I believe, at least 5 times, if not 15 times.
Yeah.
And of course, as all of our loyal listeners know, if you've been on the podcast 5 times, you get an F&O InsureTech podcast smoking jacket.
That's right. That's right.
And since we don't publish the video of our podcast, you should all know that Caribou's wearing his smoking jacket right now. Isn't that right, Caribou?
Oh, and I appreciate it. It form fits. I don't know how you got my measurements in advance without my realizing, but well done, gentlemen.
Perfect. Just perfect. Like a
The
glove.
F&O InsureTech team goes to great lengths.
Yes.
And you look great. You look great. If I wish you all could see Caribou, he looks terrific. For those of you who don't see or hear from him as much as you used to, and has a wonderful hat on, and comes to us today from
Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I've been living happily for the last 2 years and hope to live here for another 40 years or so.
That's wonderful. That's great.
That's great.
Give us a 30 seconds or a minute on Santa Fe.
So Santa Fe goes by the term the city different. A lot of people think of it as Arizona. They think it must be hot there during the summer. And we have the benefit of elevation. So the city of Santa Fe is around 7,200 feet above sea level.
Wow.
So typical summer day might be, somewhere in the upper 80s. If it's really, really part of a heat wave, you might hit the low 90s as the peak. And even then, you'd hit the low 60s as the low. You step under a tree, you get in some shade, and it's almost immediately comfortable. But we also have snow during the winter. I'm a 4 seasons kind of guy. So I actually like having a summer that's not too crazy hot, but then a winter where we get 20 inches of snow typically.
Wow.
I got a lovely ski mountain 25 minutes from the city, which, the last 2 winters got 200 inches of snow, which,
My
more than
goodness.
a guy like me. And it's just a great confluence of culture, architecture, different landscapes, and geology. And, if you like 1,000 shades of tan, this is the place to be.
That's wonderful.
Hasn't it become somewhat of a magnet location? People are relocating there, like yourself, over the past several years. Is that the case?
Well, in the last 20 years, you won't be surprised to hear that I research these kinds of things. I can't help myself. In the last 20 years, the population went from 65,000 to 85,000 in the city itself. Right? And the county is up to about 140,000 inclusive of the city. So it's still a pretty small city.
Sure.
Really large town, really small city somewhere like that. So it is growing.
Mhm.
One of the things people ask about as well, are you running out of water? And, there's a whole discussion around that, I suppose. But the city of Santa Fe has been really, really at the forefront of good water management. So I believe in those 20 years, even though the population grew like that by almost a third, the water consumption of the city has actually gone down marginally.
Wow, that's great.
Because of good water management.
Mhm.
So I think there's a lot to be said for that. Now, we can also talk about wildfire risk. We should talk about that today.
We should.
Like homeowners insurance. Like that's an interesting topic here that I can talk about firsthand.
Let's go ahead and jump in there. I think it's probably pertinent to our
Yeah.
whole our conversation as a whole. Um, uh, I think when you ask most people about Santa Fe, New Mexico, wildfire risk wouldn't come to the top of their lists that come to their mind. But but I'm sure that's the case.
Well, so I've got the benefit of having some firsthand experience here. Not of experiencing a wildfire, thankfully, but since we got here, we've been building a house. Hope to move in. By the time your listeners hear this podcast, I'm hoping that I'll be in a different location.
Good.
But we've been, no surprise then, trying to line up homeowners insurance for it. And we had heard rumors that it was getting tough in New Mexico. And actually, because New Mexico has a lot of mountainous terrain, and we're actually building in the foothills of Santa Fe, you actually have a lot of forest land here.
Mhm.
So you certainly do have some scrub brush kind of regions in the state. But at the beginning of the summer, there was actually quite a bad pair of wildfires in a small city called Rio Doso, in more of the
Right.
southeastern part of the state. A couple of years ago, we had actually a terrible, huge wildfire, probably about 150 miles from the Santa Fe area, which, was started by the federal government. So it was a prescribed burn that
Right.
was done very, very poorly.
Mhm.
The federal government is still sort of trying to dig out of figuring out what kind of claims it needs to pay for the affected homeowners, because it was a real catastrophe that was entirely unnecessary.
Sure.
Unquestionably. But so we've had some wildfires of note in the last few years. So anyway, I went to a high-end broker that I actually knew from ITC and contacted them. And
Sure. You're thinking, oh,
yeah, I mean, like if
I'm
I can't get
connected.
insurance,
Yeah.
yeah,
I know
there's
people.
a little bit. Like I know a guy who knows a guy.
I know a
right?
guy.
Like for sure. And so, very nice agency, treated me really well, and they were able to get me 2 quotes, right? And
quotes.
all of the normal high-end carriers that they work
Uh-huh.
with
No,
were
thank
not willing to even quote, which was, so it's not, they're basically saying it's no, we can't really price it at any price, right? Which is
At any
crazy.
price.
Well, I mean, if you're not going to quote me, then it means I'm not going to be able to give you a price within regulatory bounds that,
Yeah.
and then the regulatory piece is interesting. I don't think that New Mexico has strong restrictions on pricing the way that a California does. So
Mhm.
California, right, they're working on this right now, but California, you can't price based on projected future wildfire risk. Like it's a really funny irony, right? Because it implies that, the insurance regulators don't believe climate change is having a real impact. Fine, that's their choice. But like, if you can't price based on future expected risk, then you would expect some carriers to not quote at all, because I know I can't price the risk.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the case in New
It's
Mexico.
too
No
dangerous.
expert there. But so got 2 quotes, one from an excess surplus, right? And actually it was, a firm I knew and was surprised that they were doing personal homeowners at all, but a firm I respect quite a bit. And actually their quote was like $22,000 for annual premium, which was not crazy, except it excluded wildfire risk.
Except it excludes
wow.
the thing you need
Yeah.
coverage for. Yeah, sure.
And then they did provide another quote from some firm I'd never heard of, which means a little bit, hopefully. I hadn't heard of it that like, okay, it's not a mainstream one.
Man.
I feel like I know the most of the mainstream ones. And that one was for, I kid you not, $200,000 annual premium. Now that included wildfire risk, but I'm like, okay, for that delta, I could hire a firefighter to camp in my backyard 24/7.
Full-time firefighter.
That's right. And still have a little left over for his end of year bonus. Like that. So that was crazy.
I am floored by that.
I was a little bit shocked. I actually did reach out to a senior executive that I know at one of the high-end personal carriers, and they were lovely. They connected me with a senior person in their organization who did take a second look, got back to me with very, very nice note about why they were not underwriting in my area.
About why you could stick it.
Yeah, no, look, I actually very much appreciate they went out of their way when they didn't have to. So that was very, I wasn't looking for them to make a true exception for me, just to take a second look, make sure that there wasn't something missing. But the good news is that, there's another carrier called Farm Bureau.
Okay.
Right? I don't know if you've heard of Farm Bureau. I had not actually.
Oh, had you not heard of them? Yeah.
I had
Farm
not.
Bureau is a very, very interesting organization.
Yeah. So, and I want to go to school and learn more, but I heard about them, that they were still underwriting in the area. So reached out to a random agent in Albuquerque because they don't have any agents in Santa Fe. Very nice woman. And they treated me very well. Got my info, gave me a quote. And it's like $8,500 for premium, including wildfire.
Wow.
Sold.
Yeah. So look, I was very happy with them.
Yeah.
It's now covered and bound. And it's just one of those examples, though. Like there's some talk about market dislocation, right? Someone is getting the pricing wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I hope it's not Farm Bureau.
Right.
I'm not sure if I want them listening to this, but I'm doing everything I can to make sure my house is very fireproof, guys. And it's all stucco on the outside, highly inflammable stuff. So far, if there's any Farm Bureau people listening, we're in really good shape, right? There's no trees close by. We're great. Someone actually, multiple people are sort of are wrong in their underwriting, right? And, I presumably a bunch of folks would argue that Farm Bureau is wrong because everyone else seems to say, we're not going to underwrite it at, $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 annual premium.
Yeah.
And Farm Bureau is having a much more reasonable premium. Now, maybe Farm Bureau is doing some very smart things in terms of positive selection.
Could be.
That would actually help explain why maybe they're able to do, why they're pricing it right and others are sort of mispricing it, or everyone's pricing it right for themselves. But if Farm Bureau can remove a whole bunch of adverse selection in their process, remove a bunch of marketing cost, right? Then maybe that helps explain it. I just know it's an exceptional, that level of variation in pricing is so dramatic.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder. It's like when you buy a Ford Escort in Philadelphia or a Ford Escort in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It's the same vehicle essentially. Is insurance the same? Is one question. But Farm Bureaus are super interesting organizations. I believe they're in all states, Lee.
I think they're in all states. They're great insurance company.
We've done business with them on the claims side for years in different states because each state kind of runs its own org, right? They're confederated, but each is separate. And when I lived in Texas, I had Farm Bureau insurance. It was fabulous. It was the best price, and it was great coverage.
Yeah.
And,
good service, great customer service.
Yeah.
So Caribou, with that, are people struggling to buy houses around wildfire areas? Are people making decisions not to move there because of insurance?
I don't think it's hit that point yet, and I don't think it's hit the kind of inflection point that you hear about in Florida, right? You at least see the news articles about people who've been in Florida for 5 years or 50 years, and now they're feeling like they have to leave because the insurance premiums are jumping up so much. I don't think you're getting that here yet, at least not getting much attention for that. I think that, what I'm told is that it used to be sort of an afterthought in some sort of real estate transaction. And
Right.
now it's actually something that the realtors, like
Right.
the buyers, realtors are trying to get in front of,
Right.
lining up some insurance so that the purchase of a house doesn't fall apart and
Sure.
closing can't happen at the last minute because of the lack of insurance that the bank requires.
Sure.
Because usually still people are finding an insurance carrier, an insurance provider. It's just requiring a lot more work, and you can't necessarily go to the same usual cast of characters that you had before.
Well,
You know,
congratulations.
your listeners may or may not know, I'm an independent board director on an InsureTech startup called Kin.
Oh, yeah.
Which
Ken.
is in
we were going to ask you about that. Yeah,
I
please.
mean, and it's directly relevant here. Like,
Uh-huh.
actually, after I started getting some of these crazy quotes, like the one for $200,000 a year, I reached out to a couple of the folks at Kin and said, "You sure you're not opening up New Mexico soon?
Yeah.
I know we've got a state expansion plan, but maybe we should put up New Mexico a little higher on the list." Not because, hey, I need insurance. I mean, there's that too, but because when you see evidence of market dislocation, right, of folks simply throwing up their hands, like, I can't quote you. I don't know how to price this market. And those who do price it, giving you in some cases, outlandish pricing, it begs the question about, okay, well, is there enough of an opportunity to actually want to jump in there, right? And it's the old economics abhors a vacuum, right? And good InsureTechs abhor a vacuum. If there's a real pricing dislocation going on, and especially one where you think that more precision, more data intensive underwriting can potentially help to find the right price, then that sort of invites the question for the InsureTech startups.
I do have a question for you. Whenever you had a company say, "I'm not going to write it," versus the company say it's $200,000, which one made you feel worse? I guess were you more mad that it was an outrageous amount, or were you mad they wouldn't even give it a shot?
So, I've had a couple of little kids. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
Just disappointed. Yeah.
Well, look, I'm not mad. Like, business transactions need to be consensual. So, okay. And you didn't you didn't say you were going to underwrite me and then you didn't, right? You didn't say, yeah, we'll give you this for this price. And then at the last minute you pull back. That would make me mad.
Yeah.
Right? No one broke promises to me. Right? I was disappointed that sort of big, well-respected carriers, again, for sort of high-end homeowners properties would be just not for whatever reason, unwilling or incapable of, providing a quote.
Yeah.
Now, look, my speculation is that unwilling, not because there was some sort of regulatory restriction on, you just can't price how you want to with some actuarial basis to it. But probably if I were in their shoes, I'd start to get worried about adverse selection. Hey, I could give you a quote for $30,000 a year, right? And we could be actuarially very sound and make healthy profit on that. And you'd be very well insured and taken care of. But we worry that if you're going to take our $30,000 quote, it means that you've been turned down for insurance by lots of other people, and your new house is a lot riskier than we think. And we don't have confidence in our underwriting models to be able to take into account all the adverse selection we get from someone saying yes to our quote. Right. I could see that being the sort of second order issue that drives the first order to say, look, so we just can't figure out how to give you a quote that we think won't be adversely selected if you say yes to us. That's my speculation about what's going on. Still, and look, it's funny, like at the end of the day, I was only able to get one quote that I was really happy with. right? From Farm Bureau. Again, thank you very much.
Fortunately, it was a fabulous quote.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And but for them, it'd be a really expensive place to insure. And, I just, maybe because they exist, right, the others out there would be really adversely selected if I took someone. So I don't know. It's definitely complicated. And this
It's
is where I
complicated.
hope that companies like Kin and others eventually do swarm back into these markets that have had dislocation, make some healthy profits, at least in the near to medium term, and create competition, right? So that excess profits don't necessarily have to happen for those companies that are in here,
Right.
Merely healthy profits, but you
Right.
you have to have super profits to draw them in the first place.
When you look at states like Florida as an example, that's exactly what's occurred there, is that a disruptive, crazy regulatory and catastrophic market has led to a surge of new business, right? Started by all kinds of different organizations, from InsureTechs to traditional carriers. And
Absolutely.
there's this always opportunity follows behind these things. I mean, when you look at California, it's interesting. I read just a few days ago that Allstate was granted a 35% rate increase in California, because I think they were basically saying to the DOI here, stick it, and saying to the DOI, I think what you don't realize is that you need us as much as we need you. And 35% increase is a big increase.
But by the way, if Allstate is looking to overcharge homeowners for the insurance, the right solution is not to tell them, oh, you don't get to overcharge. The right solution is let them price themselves the hell out of the market,
Right.
and have 100 other insurance companies come in and undercut them, right? Oh, Allstate, you want to charge $10,000? Well, guess what? This other company is offering $9,000, and this other company is offering $8,900, right? And this other company is offering $7,700, and maybe this other company is offering that same owner $4,000 and is actually underpricing them.
Right.
But you know what? Let the surplus note holders or the shareholders of that company, right, be the ones to suffer, right?
Yeah.
Let them create a very healthy market of people competing at the price that they view is the risk that they want to take and the profit margin. And if you've got 100 folks competing and Allstate's the highest priced one, then Allstate win the business and the consumer will get to choose the cheapest carrier, the cheapest quote, right?
So,
But the problem has been that it's now such a thin market because of price caps, basically.
Right.
I mean, I'm just economics
regulation.
101. I'm not graduate school economics. You create price caps, and as the cost of something starts rising above that price cap, which, again, if you believe in climate change driving wildfires in California, which most people seem to think that's the case, then, your COGS goes up, and eventually you stop writing new policies. You exit the policies you got because you don't want to lose money, and you get a really thin market of 3 or 4 folks quoting, not 100 folks quoting.
Build that cycle.
Unfortunately, it should be a little more like theoretically like the Fed is. The Fed is supposedly a non-political organization, not influenced by the way the political winds are blowing, supposedly. And like in California, the DOI is highly political, run by, and I'll say this because I have nothing in the game here, run by a politician who's open about his ambitions to hold higher office. And so, it makes everybody feel good when you can bring a low price to market. But you have to have the inventory to do that.
That's right. Look, I'm not going to comment on politics broadly. I will simply say elections do have consequences. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And if one of the consequences is that there's price caps, then there's pretty well understood non-political, but economic consequences of what happens when you put in a price cap, especially if the COGS of that product is going up because of wildfires because of inflation of the cost of replacement lumber, things like that.
Mhm.
And at some point, right, you get a thin market, not the thick market. And the only political statement I'll say is my aspiration is that we want markets that are thick markets with lots and lots of competitors, because it's the opposite of antitrust. And we want policies that will support intense competition, right, rather than oligopolies in any given market.
So let's use that as a jumping point into another broad topic in question, and that is from your perch, which is a rather unique perch that you've had for the last 10 years or so. And that is, let me ask you this question. What do you think about the health of the InsureTech marketplace today? You like I said, you have a unique perch that you've been able to sit upon. So from there, looking out, understanding it's a little different today than it was a few years ago, that perch. Share your thoughts there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So look, there's a few ways to look at this. Let's start with, what is the job of an InsureTech? Right? Like, I like to begin with first principles. And what's their job been, 10 years ago or 10 months ago? The job of an InsureTech is to take base level technology, like satellite feeds or the web or APIs, right? Or smartphones or the cloud or AI, take baseline technology capabilities and then sort of assimilate it, productize it into the insurance value chain, the insurance sort of capability stack. And there's two ways to do that. There's two business models. You can be a company that sort of builds that product layer, productization of the basics, and then uses it yourself to offer, hopefully, a better insurance experience, better price, better claims experience, whatever, to the end insured, right? To your customer, to make the end insured your customer. A company like Kin, right? Or Lemonade or Root are like that, right? They take the base technology, build it into their own product. And then there are the B2B InsureTechs. It's like, okay, we're going to take this basic technology, then we're going to put the product layer around it so that it's easy for insurance companies to use that capability. Think about some of the companies that take satellite data about rooftops, right? And then process it into a rooftop score, right? Making it a lot easier for an Allstate or whomever to use the satellite data, right? You're not requiring the insurance company to figure out how to process satellite feeds. You're just giving them give me an address or a lat long, and I'll give you a score. Fantastic. So I think that, we've seen both of those models pursued. We've seen, the B2C ones, right, that try to use the technology for themselves, flew a little higher, right? And some of the wax in their wings melted a little bit. And they flew back to Earth. Some of them, I think sort of smashed against the ground, I'm afraid. And some of them whom sort of recovered and started to okay, now we can build a little bit more of a sustainable trajectory.
Yeah.
More at least have a shot at it. I think that the B2B ones have always had a little bit more of a stable trajectory, not quite ever the highest flyers, but also had sort of more opportunity to it's the difference between, am I trying to triple year over year? Am I trying to double year over year? And I think the B2B more typically is more of a typical SaaS model, a little bit more of okay, let's double year over year and see how many years we look. I don't actually think that folks have pulled back from the notion that using technology can improve the insurance value chain. I think people are still embracing that. I think that the debate has shifted somewhat around, who gets to capture the value creation, right? How much of that capture goes to the incumbents? How much of the capture can go to some of the B2C folks looking to directly disrupt and compete against the incumbents? How much can go to the more SaaS-like providers? You've seen some of the stock prices of the folks who, I'll say this slightly aggressively, went public a little too early. You've seen the stock prices of some of them bounce off their lows. It's no longer pure gloom and doom about them. Doesn't mean they're out of the woods from a remaining a healthy, self-sustaining public company.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the view is they got a shot at least. They a lot of the entrepreneurs have made at least some of the hard decisions under their control to give them the chance to keep up the good fight and charge on. So, and look, I'm starting to see, I feel like it's definitely not a tidal wave, but another wave of innovators in the InsureTech world. My thesis has definitely in the last few years shifted over towards, I really like niche players, right? And that's informed a little bit by my seeing, this, what I think is the success of Kin over the last few years. Florida homeowners, which is where they started, is kind of a niche. Now it's a big niche to be sure, not your typical.
But you're right. It's a unique place and thing.
Yeah, and I like that. I'm an angel investor in this company, Brightco, which does jewelry insurance. Right? Clearly a niche. I'm within Sempervirens, the VC firm I'm with. I'm taking a look right now. There's a company I really like called Armadillo, in the homeowner warranty, sort of service contract for the things in your house, which has a little interesting sort of twist on future of work around, as we work out of our house, does it become a little bit more sort of endemic and relevant to the quote new workplace? If my refrigerator is on the fritz, or if my HVAC is on the fritz, it's actually affecting my office life when I'm out of the office. It's interesting. One of the sort of ideas they're pursuing is, having this as a voluntary employee benefit, right? And I'm like, wait, and home warranty as an employee benefit, not something I would have thought goes together.
Yeah.
But maybe it does, like that. So you're starting to see some of these companies, this next wave, I really think, of finding a niche, and not that the niche is the end all for them, but it's, if they can earn their way into a strong position of being great at their niche, then solving from there.
I think it's very interesting. We've talked about InsureTech 1.0, InsureTech 2.0. I don't know what 0.0 we're on today. I think it depends what genius you're talking to in the InsureTech world. But
I'd still call it InsureTech 2.1.
Okay.
2.1.
Well,
okay,
because
I think the second wave of it was significant and substantial, right? InsureTech 2.0, like, okay, hey, we got to make sure we're finding sustainable, this combined ratio thing kind of matters, unit economics matters. And I think that's, we're now seeing that sort of extension of that to some early stage companies, right, that are embracing the new reality from the start. InsureTech 3.0 will be when we see Gen AI start to really have some sort of dramatic use cases, either transformational in terms of the product, transformational in terms of the cost structure. I think we're, so ask me in 2 years, that same question. And I think we'll be on InsureTech 3.0, where the Gen AI will have started to have material impact in, either what the base layer that the InsureTechs are productizing for carriers, or for any incumbent to use, or they'll be incorporating it to themselves. You're definitely seeing the green shoots and the experiments around it already today. But until you see that big time use of Gen AI really in the business day to day, I think it's still 2.1.
Until you see the real product come to market.
Yeah, I think that's right. Or the cost structure. One of the my favorite sayings, and I'm saying it more because I feel like it's becoming more true. There's a saying about, distribution, like, will the determinative of success between the incumbents and the startups, and this is sort of broader than InsureTech, is whether the incumbents figure out innovation before the startups can get distribution. And I think that's true, but that's like a marketing lens, right? And I think there's an operations lens, which is equally important, which is basically a question of whether the incumbents can get economies of software before the startups can get economies of scale. If you're Allstate, you've got economies of scale to the moon, right? You're at that asymptote.
Right.
But how do you get all the benefits of economies of software, right? Which is actually, in a sense, the bigger your economies of scale, the harder it can be to get the economies of software, because you're sort of ripping and replacing a bunch of stuff for the battleship. If you are a startup, you don't have anything close to economies of scale. Maybe you can use some third-party outsourcers to help get you part of the way there in the near term. But you've really got to use so much of the software to replace, so many of the processes and such, so that partly to remove your disadvantage on scale, but partly to give you some structural advantage, right? Because if I can replace some human processes with software, that is a structural advantage on my ops cost. So it's taken to the next level in theory, right? If I can use AI, think of AI as just another form of software,
Right.
extremely capable software. Yeah. If I can replace even more of my ops cost, especially as a startup, with AI software, right, that gives me more advantage in the near to medium term to offset my disadvantages on scale.
Right.
That I've got. I actually just saw a demo from another company serving the today Medicare brokers.
Oh, okay.
Where they're basically have the AI tool set to do basically lead screening, right? So I call up, I'm interested in Medicare, signing up for Medicare Advantage. I want to learn more, right? Before I have my licensed agent talk to someone, off the typical process might be at a brokerage that I'll have a screener, right? Doesn't have to be licensed, just taking some information, making sure there's some relevance there. And I heard a demo from this one company, Fair Square, that had their screener was a custom AI, right? So, it's not just sort of chatbot, it's also the voice in, voice out combined with that, and specially trained on sort of what they need to know as a Medicare screener. And it's like, that actually works.
Mm-hmm.
It actually works.
It actually works.
Right. And so, now they're like, how do I scale this book to more Medicare brokers, right? The standard SaaS cycle, right? Again, they're taking the baseline tech, productizing it, and then selling it, B2B. And now they're asking the question of, well, what are the other sort of sectors and markets where this core capability, where we can create the sort of screener agent that is really low latency, by the way, like that's part of what looks like their advantage. They customized it to be really low latency, which is important. That if you got latency, right, then it feels unnatural talking to this other quote person on the other end. Low latency is really key to making it feel natural. And that seems to be what they've got. So like, that's the kind of thing where my hope is there'll be a great example 2 years from now of a successful InsureTech 3.0.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
That makes sense.
so is it healthy? I mean, when I think back 8 years ago, it was InsureTech felt a little bit more like a rocket ship, epitomized by your conference at the time, which went from an idea to thousands and thousands of attendees in a really short period of time. And are we past the rocket ship phase?
Look, it's classic hype cycle, right? I mean, sometimes.
So we've just caught up with ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, we got, too excited collectively, right? And then, aided that excitement was aided by some financial froth out there. And then, InsureTech wasn't the only one. VC wasn't the only one to get caught up by some of the financial froth and overstimulation of the economy and money becoming kind of too cheap, less precious, right? Capital should always be precious, right? Capital is not a weapon. Capital is precious. And there were some VC firms that were referring to capital as a weapon, right? And
wow,
I think that And I think they were willing to write really, really big checks at overinflated valuations. But I think then sort of some of the challenges hit, right? Both sort of commercial challenges and fundraising environment got much more rational and disciplined. And those two things happened at the same time, by the way, which is, it's not coincidental that they happen at the same time. The commercial macro sort of becoming more difficult at the same time that the funding markets became more difficult. But they did happen at the same time. And just as in the same way that the commercial markets and the funding markets were very loose for a while at the same time. So, I think what you're also going to see, speaking broadly about like the VC funded markets, not specific to InsureTech, but inclusive of InsureTech, the next 12 months or so are definitely a period of hard reckoning for venture-backed startups. The funding markets started to get tight about, I want to say 18 months ago, give or take. And valuations started to fall back to earth. But also just the willingness of investors and VCs to write checks got much more challenging for the startups, rightfully so.
Yeah.
And a lot of the VCs were focused on making sure that their startups, that their existing portfolio had enough at-bats to adjust to the new environment, to the new reality. Again, both funding reality, but also commercial reality.
Mm-hmm.
So
like profitability, for example.
Or just like, forget profitability, just don't burn $3 million a month.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
In order.
Just a
like,
reasonable
take it
burden.
down like $500,000 a month, maybe would be nice. But look, if you've got people throwing $60 million at you, right, at $600 million valuation, burning $3 million a month isn't too crazy, right? Especially if, get more top line, get scale, and so on. But if people are only throwing $10 million at you, and that's from your existing backers to give you a lifeline to adjust to, it takes longer sales cycles, or maybe your loss ratio hasn't come down as fast as you promised that it was going to. Okay, you're still one of our companies that we want to back. We think you've got long-term. We'll give you $10 million to follow up, to give you a chance to another couple quarters to get where you need to go and reignite some growth.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not another $10 million coming in behind that.
Yeah.
And so I think that you saw a lot of investors focus on providing that extra year to their portfolio to give them the chance to recognize and adjust and then reignite.
Mm-hmm.
And the handful of startups that were under stress got that extra year or so from their existing investors and actually do get more efficient and reignite growth at the same time. And they are totally fundable and will be on a great trajectory. But the ones that, don't cut to greatness, right? They sort of cut, buy some time, but then they're just sort of humming along at, 20% year-over-year growth, which, by VC standards is basically death.
Yeah.
Like, they're going to have to capitulate because
Yeah.
there's not going to be more money coming in behind. And, that money that they got, generally speaking, is going to start running out, roughly between, now and, next summer.
So there's
And
a
pretty much
coming,
very healthy.
there's a coming event situation that's building.
And well, for every given, startup, they always have that event, right? It's always on the horizon, right? There's always, until you get truly cash flow break even, which some of them are starting to,
Right.
You have your own, company specific walls.
Yeah.
It's just that a lot of those walls are, coming in at roughly the same, 9-month window now.
Mm-hmm.
It's analogous in some ways to things like, commercial real estate, refinancing, right? They've got their issues too.
2025, 2026, those are critical years in this phenomena that you're talking about.
I would not say 2026, actually.
Before that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
If 2026 entirely different from a venture capital perspective, entirely different regime. We'll have different funding environment. Might be worse, might be a lot better. I hope it's a lot better. But it'll be a different. If a company has survived to then, it means that they've either been hyper efficient on their capital, or they've they've figured out their product market fit and their business model, or that's kind of it. Like there's not enough. The vast majority of these companies do not have enough capital on their balance sheet, do not have enough runway to make it to 2026 without some sort of clear success story that they prove out between now and then, either getting to break even or getting to a great enough trajectory on the top line that they raise more money and
Interesting. Interesting.
Caribou, as we wrap up here, I just have one last question we have to ask you about the ITC conference. And I just kind of want to know, in your own words, in your thoughts, what are your thoughts on the growth that the conference has had over the past several years, along with the impact that it had on the industry as a whole?
Yeah. Look, it's as a person starts to look back on their career, they look for their own highlights and lowlights and learnings and things to celebrate. And I don't think it'll be a shocker to anyone that, the emergence and role of ITC is really one of the absolute high points of my personal career. I'm just sort of thrilled to have played a meaningful role there. And it actually is even more the role the conference has played in the lives of people as they sort of looked at the category, and it sort of helped them jumpstart doing something they were passionate about. And I still get the occasional anecdote from folks letting me know that, which is like, I'm shocked that I actually had some positive impact on someone's life, but I'm thrilled by it. Look, I think that it played a useful role at the right time for the industry. Maybe not an absolutely unique role, but a distinctive, useful role. Connecting people, showing to some extent what might be possible. People ask me, how do I make use of ITC when I go there? And I always highlight, I always highlight that there's two things you should sort of do and recognize when you go to ITC to make it useful. One is make sure you smile. Because if you smile, people will come up to you and they'll be open to you. And if you sit there grumpy or something, then you'll miss out on people actually having conversations with you, which is really key, right? It's the serendipity that you get at ITC. And the other is to recognize that ITC is not a transactional conference. It's not the place you go to ink the deal. But it is a distinct mindset that attendees have at ITC. That I think actually is what really makes it special and useful for InsureTech, but more broadly for the industry, because people go there with a mindset of, let me just explore and learn what might be possible.
Yeah.
And if I run into something that might be tactically useful, I'll exchange cards or press the buttons and I'll follow up afterwards. Terrific. But because it's not transactional and instead it's the mindset of being exploratory, I think that people are much more open and willing to explore and listen to what are you building, right? And that goes for, senior carrier executives, for instance, right? Who normally, if you put a carrier executive, with a bunch of InsureTechs, right, they're going to be, I wonder if I can sell them stuff, and they're going to swarm, and then they're going to put the barriers up.
Oh, yeah.
But no, because everyone sort of gets the gestalt of, no, you don't go pitching, right? You go having a conversation, right? That actually is much more interesting to everyone and much more useful. So I think that's sort of a special place that ITC has played in the InsureTech ecosystem.
And even I just want to interrupt you for a second, because even in the world of insurance more broadly, you're in the expo, the area that you have with meeting tables where you can meet and have the the app directs you to a table, allocates you to a table, and you can meet people for 15 minutes. And that happens all day long. Literally hundreds of people in that conversation area at a time, because that's really the essence of what the conference is about, is learning and sharing and beginning to understand, not creating a transaction necessarily, but creating the first step maybe on it. And it's very rare if you go to any of the other insurance conferences, of which I go to many, Lee goes to many, I'm sure you have too. They're not like that.
And 15 minutes is a pretty low commit, right?
Mhm.
Like it's also nice because it means you can gracefully exit. If something's just not that interesting, after on minute 14, you can say, well, look, this is really nice getting to
pleasure.
know you. Good luck on the rest of the event. I'm sure I'll see you around through the hallways. I gotta run now. Our time's
go.
up. But it's without being offensive or without cutting it off. Which I think is actually, helpful for people to be, that means I can be more open about who I agree to meet with.
Right.
Versus if, hey, well, sit with me for lunch. Can I get 45 minutes on your calendar? No, you can't. Right? Like I got to preserve my calendar a bit. I'm a busy guy. But, can we talk for 15 minutes? That's not too bad. And be a little bit more open. And then look, I think my sense is it's sort of steady stated at a pretty healthy 8,000 to 10,000 attendees. That little COVID thing wasn't great for, mass gatherings for a year or two, shall we say. I think obviously we're now thankfully past that. Mm-hmm. And as I occasionally cough through this podcast, it's not COVID. Right? Yeah. On cue.
On cue.
But I think that it's also really valuable in sort of bringing people together. It's a nice big tent event. I think one of the things that I always, we designed it for an audience of one, for a focus group of me, right? And obviously we've gone well beyond that. But one of the things that I think was an artifact of designing it for what a VC wanted to attend is that I don't want to have to go to a P&C conference or a life insurance distribution conference, right? Or an ancillary benefit underwriting conference in order to find companies, startups doing innovation in each category, right? Mm-hmm. From a VC perspective, I want to understand the entire product suite, commercial, consumer, right? P&C, life, health, whatever. And I want to understand every part of the value chain, from distribution to reinsurance and anyone who's innovating in between, all in one place.
Yeah.
And that,
efficiency.
Right now, a conference like that needs to be really good at navigation, right? Because if you plot me in front of there was a couple of years ago, I found myself in the expo hall and I literally couldn't figure out how to leave. So you do need the groupings and the cogency and the navigation through the app and things like that. But, I think that those are things which can come naturally, and the team's been doing a really nice job sort of continuing to improve that year over year. But,
Agreed.
It's hopefully the big tent event when it comes to InsureTech.
Will we see you in Las Vegas in October?
You will. I'll be there. And you might be surprised to hear that while I may or may not be wearing the podcast jacket that I've got on right now, I am very likely to be wearing a fedora throughout the event.
Wow. What are the chances of that?
Yeah.
And how's Jay?
Jay is great. I still chat with Jay on the regular, most weeks while I'm walking the dog. I'll check in on him, keep him out of trouble.
Good.
He's got now 3 other tech events in the same mold of ITC, and the other one we did together, Transform. And I'm tangentially involved. I got a pinky toe in each of them. So we've got one actually coming up imminently. Might be happening by the time this podcast launches or lands in people's inboxes mid-September. We've got Blueprint on the prop tech side. We've got Manifest, which does supply chain and logistics tech, which is just an absolute monster of a conference. That's has the look and feel of ITC, including scale.
Cool.
And then we've got another one called Medicarians, which despite its name is a little bit broader than Medicare, but it's sort of age tech, elderly tech, which is become its own little sector within venture. And there's a lot of adjacencies, think about life and health. And
Dude, that's a huge world.
Yeah.
Huge world.
So Jay and his team are trying to continue helping these sectors, move forward with the same value and benefits that having a well-designed conference brings.
Well, we always love to visit with you and to see you. We've been doing podcasts with you for so long. We used to, in the early days, there was no video at all.
Right.
At least today we get to see Caribou, and he looks great, and in particular in the smoking jacket. You might send it out to the dry cleaner, though. It looks like you've been having dinner in it or something. I don't know.
Well,
What's going on there?
I'm a fan of the occasional cigar there. So.
Is that what
There
it
you
is?
go.
Okay.
It's got to be
Okay.
used for the right purpose.
We look forward to seeing you in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And
Thank you for being on, Caribou.
And good luck with the house, and congratulations on your insurance policy.
Thank
This
you.
is the world we live in when you say congratulations on getting bound.
Well,
right?
look, it's, I always like to take the insurance piece and make it personal, right? In my presentations at ITC, I did that in almost every presentation, maybe a little bit too much maybe I overshared on one of them, I think, but, this is an industry that matters to people's lives day in, day out. And that's part of why I feel really good to be a participant in this industry, because it matters, right? This is, I go back to, no one ever talks about, gee, I'm so overinsured. I'm up to my eyeballs in insurance, or I'm just on an insurance treadmill. I can never get off. I got too much insurance. No, that's not the problem. Now, as an industry, we need to make sure we fulfill our promises. That's when we get into trouble. If we don't, meet the expectations, the reasonable expectations around handling claims, that's a problem. If we, if as an industry, we can't provide a competitive market for insurance quotes. Right? My quote doesn't need to be competitive, but we need markets that are functioning and competitive.
Yeah.
That's what we want as an industry.
Well, one of the things that I'll thank you for, as somebody who's, and myself, Lee, too, been in the industry for decades, you and your conference and the energy that you brought were a large contributor into making insurance cool. For a long time, insurance was like the most kind of boring. It didn't celebrate itself in ways that it needed to, like you were just saying, in its importance, in its place that it occupied, and now it does, and now it's cool. Now you could say to somebody, "Hey, I work in the insurance industry," and they're like, "Oh, wow,
Oh, that's cool.
can you help me get a premium?"
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things. A big thing that ITC did was it brought the cool into the industry and helped facilitate funneling all kinds of new energy and people into our industry, which has been a benefit already, and I think will continue to be a benefit for years to come.
The real cultural change of InsureTech is that you no longer have to play golf in order to be in the insurance industry.
But it doesn't hurt.
It doesn't hurt,
Doesn't
but it's
hurt.
not a requirement anymore. Speaking as a non-golfer, sorry.
Well, your time's coming, Caribou. Your time's coming. Listen, thank you.
Yes,
Always a
thank you.
pleasure, and feel better.
Thank you. My pleasure. See you all in October.
You got
That's
it.
great.
What a smart guy.
It's always great to have Caribou on.
He's so
And
smart.
he is so smart, full of such great insight. In fact, today's podcast was just kind of full of insight into what's going on with the insurance market, trends that we're seeing. And as always, what a guy for saying yes to coming on and chit-chatting with us.
Yeah.
Really
And
appreciate that.
the remarkable thing about him is that he has the ability to kind of understand all the different pieces of the insurance puzzle and kind of, and how they fit together. And so
Yeah.
how to think about it in a more global way, which I'll speak for myself. Not all of us are quite as gifted as he is. And what an amazing resume, and what a good friend. And boy, didn't he look good in that smoking jacket.
Man, he looks sharp.
Whoa,
Looks sharp.
man.
You should all be jealous.
For all those guests who are due or near getting a smoking jacket,
Yeah.
you want to watch the video from this episode.
Of course. Of
You
course.
really do. Don't miss it.
Yeah.
Thanks to everybody. Thanks to our producers. As always, we couldn't do a thing without them. We're like in quicksand, slowly sinking down in quicksand without our producers. We're constantly pulling us out of the quicksand.
That's
So
true.
thank you very much. But most especially, thank you to all of you for being part of this little thing we call a podcast. So until next time.
Goodbye, everybody.